Thank you so much. Eric's put this together for 10 years straight. That's quite an accomplishment to get anything to happen for 10 years. So let's give Eric another round. On that subject, what I read today just reflects my own feelings. If I offend you or upset you in any way, please don't hold that against the organizers. All right. As was said in the introduction, I mostly write short story and memoir. This is a bit of memoir. Usually my politics are subtext. Today I've decided to bring them right out on the surface. This particular piece will be published in Something Unique magazine, which is a St. Louis-based literary mag. The piece is called "We Should Have Looted the Whole Foods." I was on guard. I'm gonna do this. Does that come off?
Yeah, you gotta art. There you go. Good art.
I like it better like this. Hello. It's much more relaxed. All right. I haven't read in front of people in about 2 years. I talk on the radio every day, but it's been a while since I did this, so forgive me if I'm a little sloppy. We should have looted the Whole Foods. I was on guard all night in my office on Holabird Avenue with a shotgun and a crowbar. I smoked cigarettes at the front door and listened to the blare of television playing in the lobby. The news anchors shrieked about riots and property destruction and the gruesome details of the death of Freddie Gray. The corporate-owned television news organizations refused to say what many of us already knew. Freddie Gray had been murdered by members of the Baltimore City Police Department, and the so-called riots were actually an uprising, a reaction to decades of organized genocide. But CNN and WJZ were focused on the sordid details of Freddie Gray's biography, the looting of retail stores, and the nonsensical statements that were coming from politicians and police who had been caught woefully unprepared for a spontaneous rage in the street. Around 4 in the morning, I walked out into the parking lot, crowbar in hand. I could hear distant sirens and see spotlights in the sky from helicopters that swarmed like angry bees over Baltimore. I looked at my shiny black Jaguar XJ6 and wondered if I should have driven the van instead. My office is on the edge of the eastern edge of Baltimore, on the dividing line between the city and Dundalk. The Holabird corridor is part of the dirty industrial strip that's wedged between the gentrified wealth of Canton and the working class bleakness of eastern Baltimore County. The neighborhood is a remnant of the old Baltimore, the 20th century Baltimore that manufactured components of the old America. I'm gonna skip some stuff here. Talk amongst yourselves. No, it's really long, Dave. Thank you.
No censorship.
I don't censor shit. I saw the listen. Freedom of speech while you still have it. You know what I mean? While we still got it. And we better get together or we're gonna lose. No more factions.
Thank you.
No more factions. This all will be in print, and I'll post the link and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I saw the part of the Baltimore that the affluent residents rarely see and usually ignore. After 2 decades of work in the ruthless but comfortable world of finance, managing an employment agency of this sort was a form of culture shock. My lifestyle had become as dangerous as my days owning a nightclub. My managerial position also gave me a different point of view regarding the Freddie Gray controversy. My own negative experiences with Baltimore City Police and my personal distrust of city cops had been reinforced by the murder of Freddie Gray. I got into my Jag and drove toward Canton. This is after I left my office. I've skipped a bit. Sun came up, I left my office. I got into the Jag and drove toward Canton. I turned on the radio to get some news. The station was 89.7 WTMD. There was a commercial playing for a band called Bob E. Lee and the Sympathizers, and some station-sponsored gig. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. In a city that was literally bleeding and burning from racial tensions, an FM station from a state university was promoting someone named Bobby Lee and the Sympathizers. Incidentally, right after the advertisement promoting Bobby Lee and his Civil War reenactor band, I heard an ad for the Ivy bookstore. I wondered if the management at WTMD was simply ignorant and insensitive about racial issues, or if they were truly callous and were sponsoring a band named after a Confederate general on purpose. What kind of creeps would name their band after a Confederate war criminal and slave owner? How could this band in WTMD be so utterly insensitive to racial tensions in the city? As I drove through Harbor East, I saw on my left a soldier standing on the corner, rifle in hand next to the Whole Foods. Two of his comrades were on the opposite corner to my right. I made eye contact with the Whole Foods soldier as I drove slowly past him. He looked bewildered. I turned and I laughed all the way up President Street and on 83 North. I laughed because a bewildered white soldier guarding the Whole Foods was the perfect metaphor for life in Baltimore. The comfort and safety of the privileged minority, a predominantly white minority, takes precedence over all other considerations. The main function of the police in Baltimore is not to preserve public safety. It's to contain the poor. The inequities of the city are also reflected in our segregated art scene. As a writer, DJ, and former nightclub owner, I've witnessed the economic and racial segregation of the city art scene for 30 years. The crowds I see at music venues and literary events rarely reflect the demographics of the city. Among musicians, especially those outside the rock subculture, there's been some limited progress made toward a more integrated music scene, but the white literary community remains especially insulated from the rest of the city. Some white writers of Baltimore seem to be frightened by any discussion of race or class. When I returned home, I was too wired to nap. I tried to call the editor of a local zine. I'd been writing for the zine for a number of years. The title of the magazine contained the word Baltimore, and city life was supposed to be the focus of this publication. I assumed that the most important event in Baltimore since 1968 would be an event that the editor would want to cover. But he didn't answer the phone when I called. I left him a voicemail message about my desire to write about the murder of Freddie Gray and the ensuing uprising. This editor was a friend of mine, at least at the time. He was usually receptive to my new ideas and prompt in responding to me. So when my message went unreturned for a few days, I was suspicious. I began to think about the writers on this Baltimore-centric magazine. The overwhelming majority of the writers were white, and the only black male writer for this zine was a Baltimore City cop who happened to write poetry. Furthermore, most of the writers lived within insulated white enclaves within the city. For a magazine that was supposedly about Baltimore, the writers definitely didn't reflect the demographics of the city. As I wondered why my call was going unreturned, it also occurred to me that the editor's brother was with the Baltimore Sheriff's Department. I sent the editor a text. "How's your brother doing with all the unrest? Is he okay?" Within minutes, I received a response, "He's fine." I struck up a conversation with the editor via text. I felt that the murder of Freddie Gray was a story worth covering, perhaps even a story that deserved its own special issue. The white editor had no interest in covering the story about the murder of a black man at the hands of police, despite his reputation for being politically progressive. He wasn't even particularly interested in discussing the issues surrounding the story. In the following days, I searched for a local literary publication that might be receptive to publishing my story. I didn't submit my essay to anyone. Rather, I looked at the local literary publications to gauge their attitude toward issues of social justice, race, and class. My search led me to a disturbing conclusion. The literary publications and organization of Baltimore are largely segregated along racial and economic lines. The white lit scene's response to decades of police brutality in Baltimore has been to either ignore the problem or make some weak gestures of insincere outrage. A few days after the uprising, we'll wrap it up here soon, there's a lot to go. A few days after the uprising, I saw a poster for a city lit event at the main Pratt Library. The poster featured 16 writers that were scheduled to speak. If memory serves, 15 of the 16 faces were white. I asked some of the organizers why the writers chosen for these city lit events never reflected the demographics of the city. Their responses were evasive and defensive. A few months later, I saw a poster for another city lit event, yet another tribute to Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe, incidentally, has contacted me from beyond the grave. He told me to tell all of you to please stop riding his jock. He didn't even like living here, just so you know. And he would never, ever, ever say, I'm from Baltimore. But I digress. I don't even feel like reading the rest of this. The other thing I mentioned is Ellicott City. When they had the flood at Ellicott City, there was an outpouring of support, and rightly so, because people lost their lives, businesses were wiped out. But my question is, where's the fundraiser for Cherry Hill? Where's the fundraiser for Sandtown? Does your neighborhood not count if it doesn't have a yoga studio? I'll just read the end of this. If our local media and art institutions have failed when it comes to fighting for social justice, and I would argue that they have, then the segment of the creative community that has a conscience also has a duty to create more inclusive institutions. I neither seek nor desire, nor do I need the approval of the privileged enclave for my mission as an artist. I have my own outlets. More people hear me on the radio every week than if you took every writer in Baltimore you know, totaled up their audience. I reach more people every week, so I don't need them. I don't need them, so I work around them, and I render them irrelevant. I suggest that you do the same, especially if you have talent and a thirst for justice. Thank you. Sorry about just reading pieces. Thanks. I own a radio station, but I can't put a mic back in the stand.